Okay, so I am calling to order the regular meeting of the Ordinance Committee. Today is Tuesday, January 21st at 7:02, and we have with us tonight Mr. Josh Goldstein and Wennerstrand, Heather Najelski-Eitner. Heather Dunn and Nora Najelski-Eitner is right below her. I'm like jumping my sheet, and me, Lisa Shanahan, and then, oh, good, Johan Lopez has joined us, and we'll look for other committee members as they come along. So our first order of business is to discuss and vote Section 932 entitled Districts Established concerning the reapportionment of Common Council voting districts. So I'm going to open the public hearing now. So Brian, if you want to see if there's anybody here to speak on that, that would be great.
Sure. So if anyone wants to speak on the public hearing about 9-32, the redistricting, raise your hand now. If you don't want to speak about redistricting, but you want to speak about something else, you can lower your hand. And then after the public hearing, we can allow you to raise your hand again so you can comment on any of the other items. So we have three attendees right now. Do any of the attendees want to speak about the redistricting that's on for public hearing tonight, section 9-32? Raise your hand if you'd like to speak only about the public hearing. Now we have 4 attendees.
Nicole Eady is a council member.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Nicole Eady's here. I'm sorry. One of them is Nicole Eady, who's a common council member.
Great. So we'll add
I'm going to
her.
promote her to panelist.
Yes, thank you. We can add her as a attendee.
Thank you, Heather.
Yep.
She should be coming along shortly as a full panelist.
Okay, so it looks as though no one's here to speak on the public hearing. Is that right, Brian?
We haven't had anyone raise their hand about the section 9-32, the public for what's the public hearing.
Okay, great. So we can close that public hearing then,
Yes.
assuming that nobody wants to speak, and then we'll turn it over to Common Council and to this committee. So everybody realizes that this is our, I don't know what number time that we've spoken about this.
Many times.
Many times. I think everybody's really familiar with it. The reason why this is back on our agenda is because we most recently amended it to show new meets and bounds pursuant to Diane Palladino and Stuart Wells's comments to the last iteration of this ordinance. And we now have, Matt, I'm sorry, but I don't have your last name.
Matthew Lane.
Matthew Lane. Thank you so much. Matthew Lane is also joining us. He is now working under Stuart Wells in the registrar's office. So if any common council members have any questions or comments for either the staff members or Brian or me regarding the changes that we've made, it's basically just showing the meets and bounds of the specific districts. We can talk about that. Otherwise, we can, I would entertain a motion to take this straight to common council for a vote next week for approval. Anybody want to make that motion? Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Great. So the motion's on the table to take this to Common Council next week. All in favor? That appears to be, well, we have enough votes for it to pass. Just Common Council people vote. I don't know how Ms. Najelski-Eitner votes, but we have 5 votes, and Nora said that she was in transition, so we may not actually have her audio, but it passes on to go to Common Council next week. So that's great. So the next thing we're going to do is open public participation for the rest of the agenda. So Brian, I've lost you. Oh, there you are in the Hollywood Squares. If you'd also look once again to our attendees to see if anybody has any public comment they'd like to share.
Sure. I saw that one person was raising their hand. Just let me double check. Okay, we have one person who's raising their hand to speak at our public comment section. Diane Lauricella. Diane, if you could lower your hand, unmute yourself, just give your full name and address for the record, and please go ahead and welcome.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Diane Lauricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. I hope you're all staying warm. I just wanted to speak tonight briefly. I am in favor of a name change of the Commission on the Status of Women to the Gender Equity Commission, especially now with our new administration in Washington. I think it's very important to show that we do believe in and also will uphold the rights of people of all gender selection. As I stated last month, I wanted to be assured that we will also not forget the original purpose that former Mayor Bill Collins began this commission in the 80s. And that is that women and women and people that select as women are still having difficulty at times in getting ahead or seeking equity and justice for things such as when they feel they disagree or they have a new idea. And I just wanted to lastly just state that while I look forward to meeting individually with some of the commissioners, I didn't want this committee of the Common Council to be misinformed. I'm sure it wasn't it wasn't the intent of the chairwoman who might be here, Ms. Bazet. And that is that the outstanding complaint or concern that I placed as a water quality committee member has not been resolved. So I would hope that either individual member of the new Gender Equity Committee or even someone from this committee, the Gender Equity Commission rather, and this committee, should you be interested in the reason why this particular complaint was made, that you would reach out to me or call me or text me, and we could have a little discussion, because I think communication is one of the main ways that we can achieve gender equity. It's when people assume things about others and don't understand motivations or the reason that we feel injustice occurs. So thank you for listening to me. Again, I'm in favor of the change of the name. I think it makes sense in this time, but I don't want to see the issues of women. And yes, even in this city with the Democratic majority, of which I am a Democrat, we don't have equity in certain situations, including certain commissions and agencies. And lastly, I just wanted to say, while I am very pleased that this Women's Commission on the status of women did see to it and did the work to have a listing of open vacancies, I urge them and this council to do a better job doing more creative outreach, not just having it listed on a poorly organized website, but also having ads in the newspaper or on Nancy on Norwalk for specific openings, and really looking to see that, make sure there's enough women on Board of Estimate, there are more women on Harbor Commission, and there are any women on Shellfish, amongst other things, where women are not represented, and we are 50% plus of the population. So thank you for listening to me, and please call me should you want to talk more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Diane. Any other comments?
You don't need us anymore, do you?
No. Sorry, Stuart.
Stuart, Diana, Matthew, thank you very much for all your assistance, and we
Yeah.
will get that onto public to Common Council at
Thank
the
you.
next meeting.
Yeah, we had said that earlier, but you'd missed that. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public commenters?
No one. There's only 2 other attendees, and none of them have raised their hands.
Okay, great. So I think we can close public participation at this point. And the next thing on the agenda is to accept the minutes from our last meeting, which was December 17th, I believe. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as filed? Oh, thank you, Anne. That's great. I have one small change. Mr. Candella's name was misspelled. I sent that to you earlier, Brian. So you
Yeah,
could.
I got it right there. It's
There
on
you go.
page
Okay, so
3.
that's fixed. I don't know if anybody else has any changes or amendments they'd like to make. Seeing none, motion's on the floor to accept the minutes as filed with that one correction. All in favor? So we have 6 votes for that. That's great. All right, so the next piece of business is the discuss and vote on Chapter 115, Commission on the Status of Women. I'm going to turn this discussion over to Councilperson Winterstrand and Brian. So Anne, if you wanted to kind of walk us through some of the small changes we made from the last time we were here. And
Yeah,
then
thank you. I want to acknowledge the important work of this commission and the very thorough work that was done to rename the Commission on Gender Equity to really be more inclusive. And I just want to acknowledge the commissioners that are here who did the hard work on that. Thank you. So one of the changes that we made, which was really a language change, but language is so important that we went through and sort of took out the language that referred to gender as non-conforming and instead put in the language for to describe gender diversity versus non-conformance, because it's just a more inclusive term.
If you
And
take
it
a look
really-
at, sorry to interrupt, and if you take a
No,
look
no,
at
no, please.
115-4 subsection H, I've tried to highlight it. I don't know if you can see it. We replaced non-conforming with gender diverse.
Right. And the reason really for that was to sort of emphasize through the language that the richness and breadth of gender diversity should be highlighted and not seen as something that's non-conforming to sort of pathologize gender expression. So I want to thank Brian for helping out with that change.
great, thank you so much. And then Brian, there's one other technical change we're going to make right now also.
Yeah,
we thought we'd send it-
I'll pull it up in a second. So the only other change that I would recommend, you'll see it in a moment. It's in 115.1 subsection A. And the way I view this is that that's really describing the proposed revisions that we're making and not the purpose of the chapter. And so that's the reason why, and I'll pull it up for you. I'll share it with you in a second so you can take a look at what I'm talking about. The only other change that I would make is remove 115.1A. It's because it says here to update the name of the commission originally named. That's what we're doing here. That's not the purpose of the chapter. The chapter is more adequately described in subsection B. So if we were to delete A, B would become A. And I would recommend deleting A because I don't think it successfully describes the purpose of the chapter. It's describing what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, and the way we usually do this, Brian, as far as like our form goes, we would just say the purpose of this chapter is to
It's to establish, organize,
establish and
and
organize.
appoint.
So not even having a sub paragraph A, we would just make it one.
It would be gone. It's just the purpose of the chapter is as follow, or is the purpose of the chapter is to, and then we could just do that. So we can
Just
get
keep
rid
it
of
in our
that.
usual form. Yeah. So if you fix that right now, what I'd like to do is entertain a motion to take this to public hearing at our next meeting in February. Which is the
And those
next.
are the only changes, by the way, what
Yeah.
Anne described and that proposed thing to try and clean up the purpose of this. Those are the only changes.
Any questions from council people? Nora, Nujelski-Eitner. Oops, you keep bouncing around. There you are.
I was just trying to move.
I'm sorry,
I was just
Nora.
trying to make a motion for you.
Oh, thank you. Making the motion to take it to public hearing. Thank you. So Nora's making the motion. All in favor of taking this to public hearing with those two changes that were shown. Great. So that is all of us. Great. Fantastic. Alrighty. So that matter has been taken care of. So the next order.
So real quick, thank
you.
you to Christina
Yeah,
and
thank you,
to
Christina.
Shannon and to Anne for all their help in making this get through.
Okay,
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good
Great, you
night.
guys
Thank you.
too. All right, let me just let the chief know that we are on to this. We are discussing vape.
I'm here, Lisa.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. I wanted to let you finish your sandwich. Okay, so what we are doing now, the next thing that we're going to do is go through a little bit of the changes we've made through the vape. So what I wanted to do was first ask the chief to tell us about some recent police activity on this matter. So to bring everybody up to speed about why this ordinance is so important. Mr. Kleppen is here too. There's going to be some work that the planning and zoning is doing. I don't know if he wants to update the committee about that. And then we can go through some of the more recent changes. We've gone through like another iteration of this draft, which we'll go through once over lightly. We know that we have one more one more draft that we're going to have to do, and hopefully we'll bring a final draft to the committee in February. So Chief Walsh, if you'd like to talk to us about recent activity, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start with a little background. Since 2020, with the legalization of adult use cannabis, we've seen a proliferation of smoke shops and vape shops and all kinds of shops in Norwalk selling vape products, smoking related products. And for the past 3 years, we've been more or less actively investigating some of these after receiving intelligence that they were selling cannabis and other illegal THC products over the counter illegally. To date, through the Special Services Division investigations, we've made 43 arrests, well over 15 different operations that we have conducted with arrest and search warrants after a thorough investigation, where they're taking advantage of the mindset that marijuana is legal in the state of Connecticut. It's only legal for adult use cannabis in retail outlets guaranteed by the state of Connecticut, I should say, regulated by the state of Connecticut. And we've been actually, the investigators and the undercover officers have actually been able to buy marijuana right over the counter, illegal THC products, and we've partnered with the state, and we have boxes and boxes of illegal THC products, pounds of marijuana that we've been able to sell. So I fully support this ordinance. I do believe it'll assist us for overall public safety, because through a lot of our investigations, we're determining that some of the high THC products are labeled like candy, like Snickers, and all other just regular general candy that could be consumed by a young teenager, and they're actually consuming a high THC product, which could cause health problems and other issues. So we fully support this, and having the ability to regulate these establishments at the local municipal level will give us a lot of leeway in regulating safe sales and abiding by the Connecticut state law of only allowing these kind of sales in state regulated businesses.
Great, thank you so much. And Steve, one of the things that maybe you could address is that we've been working with you to kind of coordinate both the ordinance and planning and zoning. So maybe you can give a high level state of the affairs for where we are with planning and zoning regulations with regard to vape shops. And then we can open it up for questions to staff, to committee members, and then we can get into the substance of the most recent draft.
Sure, and good evening, everyone. So just a quick background. When the zoning regulations were redone and approved last February, we actually put in a definition for the first time of what a vape shop was. Prior to that, we had no definition of that, and that was really in response to some of the things that the chief mentioned, as well as some other things going on with some different kinds of smoke shops and what that was, the visual aesthetic related to those. And, a lot of these businesses create problems in the neighborhoods they're in for various reasons. So the commission felt it was necessary to kind of get a little bit of a lid on where they could go and can't go. We went through an iteration of what the definition was, where they could go and under what circumstances. And for the most part, that was a step in the right direction. However, there were some enforcement challenges that we ran into with that. The current reading of that is that you can't have more than one vape shop within a mile of another vape shop. But the vape shop kind of little bit of a loophole definition was that if they, provided they didn't have more than 25% of their sales area dedicated to vape materials, that they weren't considered a vape shop. So that led to a lot of, I'd say extra work on staff's part, trying to figure out, well, is that 25%? Is it 30%? It's really not something that we can really get a handle on. And the problem hasn't abated at all. While we've had some luck closing down and sending out enforcement on a couple of different businesses, it's not a quick process. So we have a new amendment that we're going to make to the set of regulations. First, we're going to change the definition of a vape shop to also include like a tobacco shop. And what we're trying to do with that is we're trying to say that if you're selling vape or tobacco products and you're not one of the businesses that is exempt by the state of Connecticut, I probably should give you a little background on that, and I'll thank Brian Candela for doing the research on that. There were a host of different businesses per statute that can sell vape without any requirement from local zoning, local health, local fire or building code. And those businesses, some of them are, if you have a license to sell cigarettes, if you have a lottery license, if you have a beer and wine license, you can sell these, and I think there's a few others as well. So there are several businesses that we're not going to be able to regulate for that. So what we try to do with our new definition is saying, if you're not one of those businesses and you're selling those products, we're calling you a vape shop. And we don't care if you're also a convenience store, a deli, whatever you are. If you're selling vape and you're not an exempt business per the state, we're calling you a vape shop. And what that will do, considering that we have one legal vape shop that went in through the right way and got permits. We have several tobacco shops that we know have existed a long time. They're not problems, and we're not trying to put them out of business or regulate them. We're just saying that, okay, we're now calling you this vape shop as well as the ones that we know are legal. And what we think will happen is that you won't be able to open up a new one anywhere in the city. Now, that won't solve some of the problems in the businesses that the chief is mentioning, just because some of these are opening up without permits. We had one open up recently, just no permits. They just opened up, put a sign up, and just started selling stuff. That's one where the police went recently, and I believe shut them down. They closed, they reopened up in a new name. So it's going to be a little bit of whack-a-mole with these businesses because they're not following the rules to begin with. So no matter what teeth we put in, they're just going to try to circumvent them at every opportunity. But at least from our end, with these changes, we'll know exactly who's where and who's allowed to be where. Hopefully between health, police, and P&Z, we can close them down as quickly as they open if they're opening illegally.
Great. And that's kind of the point of our ordinance, because we know that we can't regulate them out of business, but what we can do is make it that they have to get a license. And then at least we know the people who are saying that they're going to be selling these products. And that way the police will have the ability to make sure that they're following the law as they should. And
Police will have a list.
yeah, we'll have a list of who they are. So that's the purpose of it. And Brian,
I
do you
mean,
want
this
to
is-
kind of take your,
Yeah.
I was going to say, why don't you take this opportunity to bring everybody up to date on the research you did that sort of layers in what both the chief and Steve are talking about. And then we
Yeah,
can move on
so,
for questions.
so I mean, the first thing, I'm going to let Johan speak as well, because he's done a lot of work on this as well. But, basically, we're not the first to try this. Milford is also in the process. They're a little bit ahead of us. So it's not like what we're doing is out of left field. Milford is trying to do this. Other communities have used the planning and zoning regulations to prevent future entities from opening up and selling these products by having, very, very strict planning and zoning regulations. And again, it's not going to stop the ones that are here currently that are grandfathered in and following the rules. It's going to prevent others in the future. And obviously there are going to be people that are playing by the rules and people that aren't playing by the rules. But the most important thing is that we're trying to assist the police and the enforcement, whether it's P&Z, whoever it might be. And if we can help them by lowering the threshold by 20%, and that's 20% less work than they have to do. And the one of the items here is that when these companies are licensed and they purchase the license, and the police are going to investigate a specific place, they can say, okay, this person's on the list, or this person's not on the list, and it makes it a little bit easier. And then they can work with P&Z to figure out who's supposed to be where, and there's a list that's involved. And vape is regulated very similarly to tobacco. And there are a litany of other municipalities that have regulated and required licensing of businesses who sell tobacco within their limits. And so, since vape is treated similarly in the general statutes, we believe that we can institute a licensing procedure for those that want to sell any vape products in their store. There's obviously also a health and safety component. There's also a criminality component that the chief spoke about. And again, we're trying to cast two nets here, one being the ordinance and another one being the increased restriction from the P&Z to try and make everyone's life a little bit easier, while most importantly also protecting the members of the community who might be utilizing these products. And finally, we do have entities, as the chief mentioned, that are selling cannabis legally, that are highly regulated by the state, that have had to go through a very intensive process. And those entities that are playing by the rules and had to go through a highly regulated process are being one-upped by people that aren't playing by the rules. And so not only that, but also the city collects a sales tax on those sales. And if somebody else is selling this illegally, then not only is it illegal, but it's also we're we're having sales tax receipts being missed out on. So another reason for that. And
Great.
I'll defer to Johan to see what he
Yeah,
would.
Johan, if there's anything else you'd like to say, and then we can open it up for any other questions of other committee members.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Brian. No, I just have a couple of questions, maybe for the chief or for Steve on P and Z. Out of curiosity, do we know, as far as can be revealed, whether the operators of these shops are working in collaboration? If they would know one another, is that something that has been investigated or can be talked about? Chief, this is probably more relevant.
I would say yes, that many of them are acting in concert.
Okay. And a quick follow-up, Chief. Now, when it comes to the demographics, are the majority of buyers, are they minors? Are they from Norwalk? Are they from nearby cities or towns? And as much as you can explain or reveal.
I would say the demographic of people soliciting these stores is pretty equal. We have so many shops right now. It's probably based on location on who's using them. If you're on the Wilton line, you're on the New Canaan line, Connecticut Avenue line, South Norwalk. So it's probably just like any other commerce. It's related to access and location and best price and practices and where they feel comfortable in getting it. Sort of like when kids go buy alcohol legally, there's always a store. So they go where they know. So where they've done it before. So it's probably just a broad range of demographics that solicit these stores.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks a lot, Chief. I'll turn it back over to you, Lisa.
Yeah. Any other questions from other committee members before we? Oh, great. Ms. Dunn.
So I know it's probably not a Norwalk thing necessarily, but in other towns or elsewhere, have they gone after the suppliers? Because they can't stock their shelves, these vape shops, unless they're buying the product from somebody. It's kind of like going after Reynolds Tobacco instead of directly to the corner market. Is anybody going after the providers of the Snickers bars or, Nick's, do you know what I'm trying to say?
To my earlier, most of them are acting in concert, and a lot of these are foreign-made products. I would say the distribution, foreign produced, foreign made, they're made and produced in a foreign country, and I would bet that they're all acting in concert out of one central distribution somewhere. But to your point, there's more investigation to be done, probably at a much higher level, to cross state lines to determine the true source.
So are we, I don't mean we necessarily Norwalk, but in general, is there an ability to find them as you identify them, find the trucker trucking it, or as opposed to the person with the shelf that it's on?
There's always an ability to, but we need to collaborate with other law enforcement agencies and possibly federal levels to determine the true source of all these products that have, to my earlier word, proliferated our stores in the past 3 years. I've never seen anything like it in all my years. What we've seen in the past 3 years is just an avalanche of products.
Which is why we're writing the ordinance. So the background, unless there's other questions from other staff, other committee members, we can just kind of do a once over lightly on the ordinance. And if there's questions for the chief or Steve, how that they coordinates with both of their work, we can bring that up. Generally speaking, yeah, thank you, Brian. Yeah. We're not going to go tediously through the definitions. We can kind of basically go to the next page, if you would. We've decided that
I would just note, though, on the first page, you've got some brackets. I don't know if that was on purpose for like Board of Health or Director of Health.
One of the, let me just go talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we don't know at this time is who we're going to ask to do the licensing work in specifically. We put it in as the Board of Health, kind of as a place card. It may be the Board of Health that does this. It may also be code enforcement. And so that's an internal discussion that the city's having right now as to who's best situated to do this licensing work.
And
so
it's going to be a discussion with any of the entities, any of the departments that are being considered, they're obviously going to have an opportunity to advise us as to what they can and cannot do.
Just for fun, I know you guys said that the Milford was a sort of jumping off point here. What did they choose to do?
You know, Brian, I don't remember what they did. Did you take a look at that? I think they had Board of Health there. I don't remember. Brian can look.
And does
While you
anyone know?
guys are
I mean, like,
talking about it, I can try to go find it while you guys are
well,
talking
I'd
about it.
also be curious if, you know, if once this, as the city is figuring out what the best enforcement mechanism is, I don't know if you guys have called anyone at in Milford to see if what's working,
Sure.
what's not.
Yeah, we actually went to the state to talk to them a little bit more
Oh,
about.
you did? Okay.
So that was Brian's research. And the reason why we took this approach, the approach we have in this ordinance, is because the chief came to us and said, this is really a massive problem and we need to address it, how best to do it. And so what we were doing was riffing a little bit off what happened with massage parlors maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so we were using the same type of licensing that we required there, because we thought, like, we should do what we know how to do. We know how to license massage parlors. Maybe we can use that same mechanism here, something we need to, already know how to do, use the same type of thing. So we're not reinventing the wheel. So
I
that
have
is,
an answer, Lisa.
oh yeah, what is it?
Yeah, I found it. Hold on one second. I just have to pull it back up again. All right. So, Milford, as of, I mean, this is a while back. This is in February of 23, so we can obviously reach out to them. But Milford is following the path of Westport, which means they're using the planning and zoning regulations. And so we're adding an additional layer with ordinance, which is consistent with what other municipalities have done when they've regulated and required licensing for entities that are going to sell tobacco products in their town or city. So we're doing a twofold approach. I mean, just to give you an example, I believe Westport started this process when there was 1 or 2 stores that were doing this, and they didn't want any more. We have, as you can hear from the chief and from Steve, we have way more than that. So we feel that a licensing plus an increase in the restriction of planning and zoning requirements will hopefully be able to at least make this a little bit more manageable.
That's what we think, that the two work together. Ms. Dunn?
I think that that's a good idea, and I'd also like to add that I think if you include the health department in that, I've been involved in a lot of the tracking that we've been trying to do. And if someone has to have a license for something, it will be much more easy for the health department to track how much availability of the substances are for people, so that we know how many people are impacted in the city. And it'd be really good data for us in the health department too. So I would encourage that aspect.
And Heather, just so you know, in terms of the municipalities that have required licensing for tobacco products, it's kind of been a hodgepodge. It's either been the police department or the health department. That's what I've seen. Other potential ones could be code enforcement, because they have an enforcement wing, or planning and zoning because they have an enforcement wing. But the ones that I've seen have been either police or board of health, at least, or the health department at this point.
Yep. I would lean towards health department for that reason. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so internally we'll have to have that discussion. So we're going to try to coordinate our vape products definition as much as we can with Steve, so that we're really overlapped on exactly what it is that we're regulating. We had a thought last time that we had this in front of you. We were licensing both the applicant, the person who owns the shop, as well as the salesperson. We decided that salespeople come and go. We're going to put the requirement that the person who owns the shop, or the entity that owns the shop, is the person who's going to get, is the entity or person that's going to get the license. They're going to have to fill out the application, and they're going to be strictly liable for the behavior of their salespeople. So if a salesperson sells to somebody under 21 or sells products that they're not supposed to, the applicant is going to be charged with their behavior. So
Is it strictly liable or vicarious?
Vicariously liable.
vicarious,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, should have said. You're right. Thank you for the lawyer correction, you guys.
Sorry,
Spent
it's just-
time to the practice.
Right.
Yep. So that's that.
You're going to see, we did update the contents of the application, and obviously we had to focus it more, obviously, on the applicant, which would be the entity, that's the entity or person or persons that's applying for the license, as opposed to all these salespeople. Number one, they come and go. Number two, it would be incredibly difficult to keep, you know, every employee, the name of every employee and have their licenses up there and for us to follow this and then moving
Oh,
around.
no doubt, no doubt, no doubt. But plus, I mean, as law enforcement has, I mean, as the chief was saying earlier this evening,
Yeah.
you know, with these various raids, employees get arrested, they go, and then someone else is in there at a moment's notice.
A moment later. So that's,
So,
you know, that
yeah.
is a problem, and that's why we have the vicarious liability.
So then we also have the process for, you know, if your license has been denied and, you know, what the application and notification of denial, how the license is issued, that they're supposed to, you know, display their license, the process to renew the license. And again, it could be the director of health, it could be somebody else. We don't know at this point. It's pretty, and then we have the violations and penalties. And, you know, one of the things that was being mentioned by the chief when we were speaking with him was that, you know, I mean, obviously there's a criminality aspect and it's not stopping them. And so any way that we can assist the police by increasing, you know, the regulatory burden a little bit on these places, perhaps they'll think and say, you know what, Norwalk is making us go through multiple steps with ordinance and P&Z, perhaps we should just go somewhere else, and that might lessen the load as well for the police. So in addition to any kind of criminal penalties that we now have the penalty of, you know, if you are in fact, if you do in fact have a license, you could be penalized monetarily. You could have your license suspended for a period of time. And then when you come up for renewal, you might be said, hey, you're a bad actor, we're not renewing your license. And we also have information about the signage and inspections by whoever the inspector or enforcement agent would be. And as you can see, there's the violations and the penalties. And I can go back to anyone that wants to see. And then there's also has to be a hearing process. We do need due process. There are some outstanding questions about due process and about what we have to do in order to make sure that people's due process rights aren't being affected. My opinion would be that we have to defer to, you know, err on the side of providing due process rights so that we don't give somebody a solid appeal off of not allowing them time to defend themselves in that regard, as opposed to trying to shut them down unless there's obviously a clear and present danger. And that's something we're gonna have to take a look at further. And then obviously the effective date. So that would be.
Brian, I'm looking, did we added in that you could take it to Superior Court if you didn't like the decision by the Director of Health, right? Or have we not put that back
That
in?
might not have been added in yet. I don't know. I'm
Yes.
taking a look. Yeah, you can. We have an
Yes.
appeal. It just doesn't say the Superior Court, but that's where you would go. I mean, if
Yeah, so we need to add that.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that we were going to do at the very end, and we must not have added it. So that's the final thing for you lawyers in the room. You know, we always want to give people the ability to take to the Superior Court if they have a disagreement. So that's just the general overview. And Mr. Goldstein, you look like you have a question.
I'd say two quick questions. One, Brian, this is going to be kind of for you.
Yeah.
Under the penalty section, there's the first, you know, the fine of $250 dollars. I remember there's sort of a line of demarcation where if the fine is above a certain amount, the hearing or the hearing requirements actually differ.
right.
It's $250, right? Because if we go above, or say it's like 1,000 or something like that, there's a different hearing mechanism that's required, right?
That's my understanding. I would have to go back and take a look at, I believe we've used General Statute 7-148 as kind of the threshold for the penalty section. That might be, since the way that I'm focusing on this is that it's a health safety issue, and this is where the municipality is getting the power in order to do this licensing requirement. So under that theory, I believe the penalty is still $250 per violation. So that's where the $250 came from.
Here, and I had another question, and the chief may help me with some of this, because I feel like there's sort of a conflicts of law thing here, where if the Newark Police Department conducts a raid, finds that, you know, there is someone illegally selling these products, are we as a city allowed to temporarily suspend their license pending a hearing if they are found to be in possession of controlled substances? So I'm wondering if there's sort of I mean, we're talking about licensing, but if you are, I mean, one of the categories for losing your license is possession of a controlled substance. I mean, it says it right in the ordinance. But I do wonder whether we can really clamp down and say, if you are found with this stuff,
Yeah, we've had that
we're
question.
we're just gonna suspend you from doing business for, selling these kinds of products, or really just suspend you from doing business temporarily pending a hearing.
So one
But
of
I
the
don't-
things that Brian's looking at exactly, Josh, is whether or not you need a conviction. Whether simply being arrested, whether, do you have, what's the due process there, a conviction or an arrest? So we are still looking and researching that to some degree. But Chief, if you could pick up what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, if you sort of compare it to liquor sales, and if we were to go into a bar and find 20 underage kids or
Yeah.
such liquor violations, we don't have the ability to suspend them. Only consumer protection does. So what we would do is write a referral with all the police reports and email to them immediately, and then they go through their process. So on the local level, there's another process that they need to adhere to, and that's at the state level. So
Okay.
that's something that we would have to write in or have the ability, and it would possibly be above our level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
This isn't by the liquor establishment, but that is like on our list of things to have.
Yeah, and I just don't know, because I just don't know this issue as well, on whether there is a analog to the liquor, to like a liquor control board at the state level. For vape, I don't know if there is. I would doubt it, but the chief would know better than I would.
Yeah, and we're creating our license, so it's
Right.
that's the
So,
thing.
and that's
like,
the thing.
This is our
You're sort of
license. Yeah, so we're going to not
Yeah.
get the license, but the question is it proper?
under Connecticut statutory law,
Right.
are we allowed to temporarily suspend a license if they are
Which
found to be in
reissued.
possession?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, which could be reissued if a hearing turns out and they're found not to be liable, or it was some, I don't know.
But remember,
But-
it's our license that we're issuing, so we're kind of comfortable that we could do something there. But the question is, does it need to be an arrest or conviction? Because because of the due process part. So
Mhm.
we do have that on our.
It's actually interesting that Josh, that you raised that, because that's like the specific question that's kind of up in the air right now. So we'll get back to y'all on that.
I would say it would lend on the state leans towards the ability to run a business and not shut them down, because probably it's the other option is nuisance abatement. There is a nuisance abatement civil statute, but it has to be proven by multiple criminal violations by employees or preferred patrons. And something that we did at the Office Cafe probably about 8 years ago, where we were able to civilly shut that business down after we showed a pattern of criminal behavior by the employees. But it's a long process on the police side.
I would say that, as I said before, I think we have to err on the side of due process to protect people's rights. But again, I think that if people are viewing this ordinance as the silver bullet, it's not going to be. What it's going to do is, again, it's going to provide a list to the chief and planning and zoning and code enforcement, whoever's involved, to let them know who are the ones that are actually applying for this license. So we have a list, and it's just going to make their job easier when they're going in there saying, this person has at least attempted to play by the rules. Now, maybe the person that isn't doesn't know about the rules, and they can be, informed about them, but it hopefully will make it easier in terms of providing an up-to-date list, an exhaustive list of who's doing what between the regulations and the ordinance. That's really the goal of this, I think.
Yeah. I appreciate this, by the way, and between the chief and Brian, I mean, just like, and Lisa, obviously, I knew this was a complex issue, but it was my big question after reading the draft was, is this possible? And I agree with, I would imagine the chief's right, which is that Connecticut law generally favors that you're not supposed to shut down a business unless there's some sort of, in all likelihood, a conviction or some sort of a civil finding that's an analog to that. But I was curious if it's an especially bad actor, or if the offense rises to a certain level or something, some sort of exigent circumstance.
Yeah, so we're sorting. You put your finger on our biggest issue, our Achilles heel on this.
I would also just say that, if we err on the side of due process, you know, they're going to have the opportunity to challenge whatever suspension or revocation
Oh,
of
yeah.
license that we have. They have the chance to challenge that. They can take it to the Superior Court. And, you know, I find it hard to believe that, well, I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's less likely that somebody who's actually taking the time to apply for a license is going to do stuff like this for the most part. I'm saying it's more probable than not that they will try to play by the rules. You won't get the egregious act. I think the egregious actors will be the one that are trying to ignore the license. And
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, you know, the people who are going to want to, you know, play by the rules. I mean, if you have a license revocation hearing, in all likelihood, you're going to have to hire legal counsel. You're going to have to spend money on that. You're going to have to spend time on that. And even if for some reason the hearing doesn't end up in I'm not going to call it a conviction, but you know, like you're found liable for whatever, you know, that's a big hit to the business. So I can understand even if, you know, just from a litigation cost perspective, it's a severe disadvantage. But I can, you know, look, the people who are going to flagrantly violate this are the people who are going to flagrantly violate it, and obviously the chief and, you know, and our police have been dealing with these people for a long time.
we're
So
just
I
hoping
just
to maybe catch
right,
some
it's
of
to
the
give them
people.
another tool. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just a way for them to identify. It's kind of like, you know, like when you're putting sand through to try and see if you can find, like, you know, some precious
Absolutely.
stone or something. Try to get rid of the obvious ones, and then have the chief and P and Z focus on the ones that need to be focused on. Yeah, I agree,
Yep.
Josh.
And also
Okay.
what we're really doing is focusing on the vape business itself.
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah.
that we can do it narrowly enough so we can say, like, you can still run your business, you just can't sell vape. So clear everything.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
that's what we're focusing. That's how we think we might be able to fix it. So we'll stay tuned. That will be hopefully resolved in the next
Heather and then Ann,
iteration.
Lisa.
Well, first, does Josh have any other questions? Are you?
No, I'm all set. Heather was after me.
Thanks,
Okay, good.
Josh.
Yeah, Heather and then Ann. Yeah.
A quick question, I guess, is for Chief Walsh. What are the situations I would assume where you could immediately shut down, like if somebody's selling fentanyl or narcotics, laced vapes, or I'm not a drug person, so I don't know. But are there levels that are so illegal that you can shut down immediately without, or no? If it's such a health hazard that we're worried that kids are going to be dying or something.
No, because more or less our duties would be to secure all that evidence to prevent that from occurring. So that's our job, is to secure the evidence and to seize goods, but we don't have the ability to shut down businesses without nuisance abatement civil orders.
Is that
Chief, I don't
anything
know,
else?
Chief, is this accurate? Is it similar at all to when the fire marshals are trying to get into people's homes and they actually need to go to the state's attorneys to try and get like those warrants in order to get into somebody's homes? Is it similar to that, where you have to go through a kind of a slow regulatory process with the state in order to shut somebody down like that?
I do believe that there's all kinds of restrictions on all kinds of inspections done by many municipal departments on how and when and how those inspections are done, and what authority and what powers they do have when they do see violations, and how they see those violations.
Yeah. Okay, Ann, do you have your question still?
Yeah, I just was curious, and maybe this is a question for Brian, what the grandfather process looks like for the existing shops, and how labor intensive is that, and what would we anticipate as difficulties there?
Yeah,
That's
so
for
I mean,
Brian and probably Steve. Steve might.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'll just throw out some stuff and then I'll let Steve talk because I don't want to get in trouble. With the grandfathering in, it's my understanding that anyone that's, you know, legally selling these things, meaning they went through the appropriate planning and zoning steps, and they're, you know, outside of a mile from another business, and the P&Z has kind of blessed their business in what they're doing. You know, again, understanding that at the time it was 25%, that they're going to be allowed to continue to sell. The idea from the P&Z restriction is to try and prevent future businesses from coming in. And I think we have so many, and I'm not saying too many, but so many of these places that have legally applied that maybe I'm wrong, but I would think that there aren't any other locations where somebody could come in and sell it legally if we still have that mile radius. But I'll keep quiet and let Steve talk.
Yeah, I think from my vantage point, I think the enforcement piece, especially say there's like just like a typical corner store, convenience store, and they have a rack of vape products there. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to prove when and how those products got there, because if they just, you think about like if they get like a new Coke has a new soda product and they put that on the shelves, they don't come to the city and get permission to do that. It's just a new line of merchandise that they're selling and it just ends up on the shelves. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to find every little store that's selling vape products and, be able to shut them down if they're not one of those exempt businesses per the state. My biggest concern is those really problematic actors that the chief is having issues with. And I mean, at the very least, if we can like shut them down as soon as they open up, that would be a big step in the right direction. And then for us, then would be the next step would be like those ones that are really from a visual standpoint are, have all the merchandise in the window and it's just really an attractive nuisance at that point. And then getting those shops that have opened up illegally, maybe they're not selling illegal products, but they're selling vape when they don't have permission to sell vape, going after them and closing them down and,
I mean,
taking steps from there.
I mean, my feeling is that, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of them that are grandfathered in, but businesses close all the time. And when new ones open,
Right.
you're going to know that that one can't open because it cannot fit the 1 mile radius. So it might take some time, but I think over a period of time, legally speaking, these businesses will have less and less geography in which to operate because the ones that stay in business will negate new ones from coming in because of the updated P&Z regulations going
Yeah.
forward.
And it might help. I don't know if you guys have talked about this, if there was something more on the state level that they could do to regulate. I mean, I know they're going to say they don't have the ability to regulate it because of what it would take, but I mean, the way liquor is regulated, the way that tobacco seems to be regulated, this seems to be more, as much or more of a nuisance as any of those other products. So if there's something we could think about, I don't know if other states have done something along those lines, but that would definitely be something worth exploring.
Your state
think
rep.
that, yeah, I think that none of the states are really on top of this. From my conversation with the state of Connecticut, it sounds like Massachusetts is struggling with this as well as Connecticut. So I think that, obviously tobacco and alcohol have been around a lot longer than vape, and I guess they gotta, catch up on it.
Great. Any other questions, any comments, Johan, that you'd like to make before we close?
No, pretty much Brian covered it all. So, but quick question for Steve. Steve, by any chance, can this be used as an opportunity to kind of put or kind of impose any sort of aesthetic restrictions on these shops just because of the way they look and all these sorts of things? Is this, or is that something that just requires a different process?
So any new like legally intending business that wants to sell vape would have to go through the special permit process. So we have more discretion on each location. Say just for instance, they had the ability to apply for a special permit because there wasn't another business within a mile. So that particular location would get looked at, how they were proposing to operate the business would get looked at, the aesthetic of the building, how they, we would, I think in this instance, definitely ask how they were planning on displaying their merchandise. We don't have the ability to regulate like signed content. So it would be hard to, we talked to Matt Sabienza, who's one of Brian's colleagues, and we asked him, could we, for that kind of business, could we say you can have your sign maybe would be smaller than everybody else in that same zone? He thought that would be something that would be kind of thin ice. Again, we could impose those kind of things and they're legal until we're told they're not legal sometimes. So somebody could sue us and then we could lose in court and then we, end up with, back to where we were otherwise. So we do have some controls over that with the special permit process on aesthetics. It's a little murkier case law wise, but I think if those were concerns, and I think the commission would have those same concerns you expressed, we could impose those and we'd see if they held up, legally over time.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Yep.
Great. So stay tuned. We're going to take this back to staff, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we hope to be able to answer the question that Josh and we are struggling with on the you know, the due process part. And then Johan's got some changes he wants to make in the lead-in for the general provisions and purposes. And so there'll be a couple of little changes, but this is going to be the general structure of what the ordinance looks like. So with any luck, we'll be able to take it to public hearing in March if we can get our work done by February, which is what we hope. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you to Steve and the chief
Heather.
for coming.
Yeah,
tonight.
thank you to Steve and Chief very much for coming tonight.
Hey,
And
thank you, everyone. It was a great
evening.
discussion.
We really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For all the help from the
Thank you.
committee too. All righty. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.